ask you to think about a specific memory. Not a big one, not a birthday or a crisis or a moment you have told stories about. A small one, an ordinary Tuesday. Your mother in the kitchen, early morning or late night. It doesn't matter which, because the answer was probably both. The sound of vessels, the smell of something on the stove, and if you walked in and asked her how she was, what would she have said? Fine, I'm fine. Did you eat? That redirection, that immediate practice to pivot away from herself and back toward you. I want to stay with that for a moment because I think that tiny, repeated gesture, that lifelong habit of answering a question about herself by asking one about you, is one of the most telling things about how Indian women of that generation were shaped. And I want to ask something today that we rarely allow ourselves to ask, not to diminish her, not to rewrite her story with cruelty, but with a kind of honesty that is the only real form of respect. What if what we called her strength was something else entirely? We have a very stable, very beloved story about Indian mothers. She sacrificed everything. She ate last. She stayed up when we were sick and was fine in the morning. She never complained. She managed the house, managed the relationships, managed the emotions of everyone inside those walls. And she did it without being asked and without expecting recognition. And we tell the story with enormous love, with pride, with a grief that is also gratitude. She was strong, she was devoted, she was everything. And the story is true. All of it. She was those things. But there is a question that sits underneath the story that we almost never ask. Not because we don't care, but because the asking feels like a betrayal, like ingratitude, like we are taking something beautiful and making it ugly. The question is this: did she have a choice? Not in the large sense. Did she choose her husband? Did she choose to have children? In the small daily sense, did she have the choice to eat first? Did she have the choice to say, I'm tired, I need to rest, someone else please manage dinner tonight? Did she have the choice to have needs that she expressed openly without guilt, without the fear of being seen as difficult or selfish? When we ask that question honestly, and I think most of us already know the answer, the story begins to look a little different. What we called her strength was in many cases the absence of alternatives. She didn't eat last because she was noble, she ate last because the culture she lived inside told her that a woman who served herself before her family had failed at something fundamental. She stayed up all night because there was no one else to stay up. She never complained because complaint from a woman in that position has a cost. Social, relational, sometimes much more than that she had calculated and decided she could not afford. Her silence was not serenity, it was survival strategy. And here is where I want to be very precise because this is the part that gets misread. I'm not saying she was weak. I'm not saying her love wasn't real or that her devotion was false. Her love was entirely real. Her investment in her family was genuine and complete. What I'm saying is that we took her love, which was real, and we used it to justify a structure that was not fair. We pointed at her willingness to give everything and we called it proof that this was right, that this was what a good woman looked like, and that this was what love required. And then we handed that proof to our daughters. We told them, look at her. This is what devotion looks like. This is the standard. This is who you should aspire to be. And our daughters looked and they learned and they internalized a model of love that had exhaustion built into its foundations, not because anyone was cruel, but because a framed thing looks like truth, and we have been framing her exhaustion for so long with gold borders and words like sacrifice and devotion and strength that nobody could see the exhaustion underneath anymore, only the frame. Why do we do this? Why do we take suffering and make it sacred? I think there are two reasons and both of them matter. The first is love, genuine, protective love. If your mother gave everything, if she suffered in ways you witnessed as a child, then the most bearable version of that reality is that her suffering meant something, that it was chosen, that it was noble, that it was strength, because the alternative, that the person who loved you most was in a structure that did not treat her well, that you benefited from that structure, is much harder to sit with. Framing her exhaustion as strength is, in part, a way of protecting yourself from the guilt of having been held up by it. The second reason is to social necessity. A society that depends on women's unpaid and acknowledged labor in the home, in the family, in the emotional management of relationships needs that labor to feel voluntary. It needs women to feel that they are choosing to give, not being required to. And the most effective way to make something feel chosen is to make it feel virtuous. If giving everything is what a good woman does, then women will give everything and call it a choice. The narrative of the sacrificial mother is not just a cultural sentiment, it is a functional mechanism. It ensures the system continues, and it works so well because it is wrapped in something real. The love is real, the sacrifice is real, the devotion is real. You just can't see the structure underneath it because the love is so present, so warm, so genuinely felt. Here is where it lands in the lives of the women I speak with. They grow up watching a model of love that was inseparable from self-erasure. Mother's love meant giving without keeping score. It meant being available. It meant making yourself small so everyone else could be comfortable. It meant your needs coming last if they came at all. And they absorbed the model completely, not as an ideology, as a felt sense of what love is, what it looks and feels like, what it requires. So when they enter their own relationships, they bring that model with them. They give generously, they manage, they accommodate, they make themselves smaller in the specific ways their mothers did. And when a partner does not reciprocate in kind, when the labor is not shared, when the emotional weight falls unevenly, when she finds herself at 40 doing exactly what her mother did, there is a very particular confusion that arrives. Because on one hand, she is unhappy. She can feel the unfairness. She is tired in the deep structural way her mother was tired. But on the other hand, this is what love looks like. This is the model she was given. To want something different feels ungrateful. Feeling like she is rejecting the very thing her mother gave her. Feeling like she is saying her mother was wrong. And so, she stays in it, adjusts more, gives more, hopes that eventually the system will soften and she will be seen. And sometimes that happens and often it doesn't. And she grows into her 40s carrying something her mother carried before her and her grandmother before that, the specific accumulated exhaustion of loving inside a structure that was not built to love her back. The first thing that changes when we see this clearly is the guilt dissolves. Not the love for the mother remains. Often it deepens because you are now loving her as a full person rather than as an ideal. But the guilt, the feeling that wanting something different for yourself is a betrayal of her, that begins to release. Because you're not rejecting her when you choose differently. You're completing something she couldn't complete herself. You're taking the love she gave, which was real and sustaining, and building a life that honors it by not repeating the suffering that accompanied it. She didn't suffer so that you could suffer more gracefully. She didn't give everything so you could inherit a template that costs you everything too. She would have wanted you to eat first, not metaphorically, actually. She would have wanted you to say when you were tired and have someone hear it. She would have wanted you to have a marriage where the weight was distributed and where your needs were legible to the person you built a life with. She couldn't have that. That is a grief worth holding, but it is not a blueprint worth replicating. The second thing that changes is that you can begin to have a honest conversations with your partner, with your children, with your own interior sense of what love requires from a different starting point. Not from the question, am I giving enough, but from the question, is this sustainable? Is this reciprocal? Is this the kind of love I want to model for the people watching me? Because someone is watching you now the way you watched her, and what they learned about love what love requires, what it costs, what a woman's role within it looks like. They are learning from you. I want to return to the image I started with, your mother in the kitchen, the sound of vessels, the smell of something on the stove. I want you to hold two things at once if you can. The first is the love, the real, warm, sustaining love that was present in the kitchen. The fact that she was there, consistently, reliably, completely, is something that shaped you in ways you will spend a lifetime understanding. That is not nothing. This is a profound gift. The second is the question, was she okay? Not was she managing, not was she coping, but in the honest interior sense, was she okay? Was there a life she wanted that she was not living? Was there something she swallowed so many times that she forgot it was there? Was there a version of herself before all these roles settled into permanence that she lost track of? We will not be able to ask her that now, most of us, or if we can, she may not have language for it. She may say, I was fine, I'm fine, did you eat? But we can ask it ourselves, and we can ask it of our daughters, and in asking it, in taking it seriously, we begin to do something that could not be done in her generation. We begin to separate the love from the suffering, to keep one and refuse the other. She deserved that, and so do you. The patterns we inherit from the women before us, how they enter our relationships, how they shape what we expect from love, and what it actually looks like to begin to set them down. That is at the heart of Dear Sister, Dear Brother, Letters of Freedom. But it is also specifically about the role that siblings play in this, because the brother who watched the same mother, who sat at the same table, ate the same food that she cooked last and served to everyone else before herself, he inherited something too, a model of what women do, what they give, what they don't ask for, and what changes in a family when he begins to see that clearly is something I find genuinely moving to think about. That conversation is in the book, and the details are in the show notes.